What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over some running backs to trade for this week, but the majority of the video will be situations you guys have asked about. So I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but first gotta start off as usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which quarterback has had the highest average time to throw so far, and the answer is Baker Mayfield. The improvements to their offensive line have definitely worked out so far this season, and Lump Nubs was the first to get that one right. Today's stat, 9 different running backs have had at least 500 rushing yards so far this season, and only 2 have averaged fewer than 13 fantasy points per game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one, who is the other. So, I know this is a running back trade targets video, and we will certainly get to a few guys you can trade for, and then one guy I'll remind you to trade away. But I think it will be a little bit more helpful if first we go over some of the situations you guys have asked about the most. So we'll be going over Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde, and Kenyon Drake. And then again, I will mention a few running backs to trade for. And then of course, I'll remind you, if you have Todd Gurley, gotta sell him. So first, Zeke. Obviously, he was just a smash before the Dak injury. He was actually getting a little bit unlucky, and he was still performing phenomenally. He was going to finish as a top 5 running back, but this injury is huge. You know, we've seen in the 3 weeks since Dak got hurt, so if we throw out the game he was hurt during the game, just the 3 full games without Dak Prescott, Zeke has carry counts of 12, 12, and 19, and then target counts of 10, 2, and 2, which has only resulted in 7.3 fantasy points per game after averaging 20 with Dak. That's huge. Like, that's a really big difference, and there are reasons to be concerned with this offense. Obviously, if you've watched a single game since Dak's gone down, it's concerning, especially since, you know, I kind of think they should be using Pollard more, and I guess there's a chance that they start to do that at some point. Am I expecting next week Pollard to split the snaps with Zeke? Absolutely not. But maybe to close the season, could Pollard get more and more work? Maybe. It's just something to consider. But we also need to just look at what volume is he getting. You know, I know the volume is less valuable on a per touch basis. When you've got Andy Dalton or Ben DiNucci as your quarterback, if you get a carry and a target, it is just worth less than when you had Dak. But he is still getting 20, 13, and 20 touches over the last 3 weeks. And I don't need to remind you how thin running back is. You know, I'm not just giving, I don't own Zeke in a league I'm allowed to trade in, but I'm not just giving him away for nothing, because that doesn't help you, right? I mean, you can't just trade him away for some flex player, because that's not improving your team. That's just getting frustrated with a player, dumping him for someone you're barely, if ever, going to use. And then how does that help you? So if you're not making your team better from a trade, don't do it. Now, I have not done the full rest of season rankings yet. I do that on every Tuesday. So the day you guys are watching this, sometime during the day, all of that is going to be updated. But I did go through and kind of do each of the running backs we're talking about here, and just saw like the kind of range they're going to be in. And it looks like Zeke's going to fall in that running back 15 to 18 range. So roughly a mid-range running back 2. I don't think that he is a running back 1 anymore, but he is still going to get into the upper teens for touches, and he is going to be the clear goal line back if they can ever make it to the goal line. And once Andy Dalton does return, I really do think that he is going to perform better than we've seen him do so far. And who knows, maybe there's a chance that they try and trade for someone like Winston. That's who I thought they could have maybe traded for or could trade for in the future, because remember, they're awful, but their division is just historically bad. So even if they only have a few wins in the season, they're always going to be in it. This isn't a situation where we get to week 14 and 15, they're just going to be completely out of the division. This is an awful division, so they don't need that many wins to make the playoffs. So they're always going to be thinking, okay, if DiNucci and Dalton are not the answer and we still think we can make the playoffs, maybe they do go out and trade for someone. So that is a path that exists, and that's why you can't just completely write Zeke off. As of right now, I do think, considering that path and considering what happens if they don't trade for someone, running back 15 to 18. So for you guys, that depends on what your league mates also view him as. If you own him and someone places a higher value on him than that, they say, no, I think he's like the running back 10 to 12. Well, then I would trade him away because you're getting a value. But if you have Zeke and no one in your league is willing to give him up for more than low end running back 2 to kind of flex value, well then why would you do that? Why would you make a lateral move giving away Zeke, or even lose value giving him away? That doesn't really make sense. And the flip side is also true. Let's say you do not have Ezekiel Elliott on your team. If his owner is asking for low end running back 1, high end running back 2 value, don't do that. That's not worth your time. It's not worth the downside of him continuing to get 7 or 8 fantasy points per game. But if someone wants to trade him away, they're just completely fed up, they don't trust this offense, they don't want Zeke anymore, and it only takes, flex value or maybe 2 solid bench pieces, absolutely do that. If you're watching this, then you probably built a very deep team. And so you probably have a few bench pieces that could be a flex option weekly on another team. And if that's the case, I would rather acquire Zeke after these 3 straight just garbage games than keep some of these backups that you're never really going to use, right? We all have those guys in your team. You can't just have a team of a bunch of running back 1s, right? You have people on your bench that you're honestly, they're cool for depth and bye weeks and injuries, but I'm probably not going to start these guys. If you can package a few players like that together, what is Zeke going to cost right now? Again, that is actually a question. In some leagues, people are still going to be asking for low end 1 to high end 2 value. And so you can't possibly do a trade like that. But in some other leagues out there, he's not going to cost anything because his owner is just done. And so it is league specific, but I would check. It's always worth sending something out there because you don't know unless you ask. Going off of that, we've got Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Kenyon Drake. Now, these guys are a little bit different because, they don't hold that same name value as Ezekiel Elliott. Everyone knows who Zeke is. Not everyone has a deep understanding of Kenyon Drake. And so that's different. And then they're also in different situations. Zeke lost his quarterback, but Drake is, hurt. And Clyde has new competition. And the Colts seem to be moving to more of a hot hand situation, similar to the 49ers and the Rams. But while all of their situations are different, the logic behind these trades is always the same. Where do you value the player at, and where does your league? It doesn't matter why a player's value has dropped. What is their current value? Okay, because it's not even where does your league overall value someone, because maybe everyone in your league is just done with Zeke, except for the one guy that has him. Well, then it doesn't matter what those other people think. The person who has him really still believes in him, and so you can't trade for him. So it only takes one player if you're trading away or trading for. So again, it kind of comes down to rest of season value. Where do you hold these guys in terms of their position amongst other running backs? After my first look, I've moved Jonathan Taylor down to a low-end running back 2. He's my running back 19 right now. I believe I've kept Clyde at the same spot. If it's any different, it's 1 or 2 spots. So right now he's running back 21. I think that's what it was last week, but maybe it changed just a tad. But running back 21 for Clyde, and then going after Drake, he's my running back 34. So I really tanked Drake after he got the injury because, of course, he's got ligament damage to his ankle. That's not good. It's going to take a little bit for him to return, and I do think there's a chance. Is Edmonds for sure going to take the job and never give it back? I don't know. We can't possibly know that until we see him play and we see what the team does after. But is there a chance that happens? Yes. And because that path exists, you have to tank Drake in the rankings, especially because he's hurt. You just don't rank people high when they're injured. I feel the worst about Drake because of what I just talked about, and also the fact that I think Edmonds just is a better running back. I think he is more talented. I think that will come out if he gets some time as the starter. And I think, again, that path exists where Edmonds just keeps the job. But I think Jonathan Taylor and Clyde are still low-end running back 2s because there really aren't that many running backs with major roles in their offenses. Are you going to rank Taylor and Clyde behind guys like Swift, who we are going to get to, Chase Edmonds, Fournette, Ronald Jones, Michael Pirine, Zach Moss, because that's really like this next range of like roughly in that 25 to 35, that kind of grouping. So it's not like there's just 40, 50 running backs out there every week where we're like, I could start this guy and this guy. There are very few elite running backs, and a lot of them are hurt. So I think considering these guys as low-end running back twos is the correct range, because I only see about 25 running backs week in and week out that you're like, yeah, I like this guy. Outside of the top 25, it's really thin. And I know some of you might be upset about how your running backs are performing, but look at everyone else's team, right? Scroll through the other teams in your league and see how they feel. Because if you didn't have Alvin Kamara or Dalvin Cook this last week, you very likely got at most 20 points from one of your running backs. But for most people, they probably had 15 or fewer from both running backs. Only 9 running backs had 16 or more fantasy points this week, and 4 or 5 of them were probably only started in 14-team leagues. Like, this wasn't, the top 9 running backs all did well. This was half of those top 9 that got 16 or more fantasy points probably just stayed on people's benches, and they were just kind of spikes in production. So don't get too discouraged after weeks like this, because it's pretty tough to feel amazing about your running backs when only a handful did well. So I'm not trying to be a downer. I probably had my best week in fantasy on the season, at least in season long, not in DFS. So I'm sure, since a lot of your rosters are probably similar to mine, I'm sure a lot of you did have a really good week. But I saw some people that were very sad about their teams this week, and I just want to remind you that scoring overall was way down, and that's going to directly impact running back production. We had 2 out of 14 games this week have a 50-point over-under heading into the week. We were going into this week like, oh my goodness, scoring is going to be way down, because a massive part was weather. Weather was really, really bad this week, and so when teams can't move the ball and they're not scoring touchdowns, well, how is the running back going to perform well? We had a few weeks in a row where it was like every single game seemed to have a 50, 55 point total. And so I think we had one game, the Seattle and 49ers game, was at like 54. And then I think Cincy and Tennessee may have been at 50. But other than that, it was only the Thursday night game that was over 50 point total. And that game didn't even really go off. So I want you to remember, production across the board was down this week. And so don't get too discouraged if your running backs didn't do that great. And remember the values on the 4 running backs I mentioned. Zeke, running back 15 to 18. I'm not 100% sure yet, but he's going to fall roughly in that range. Jonathan Taylor, running back 19 right now because of their new hot hand approach. I don't think that was randomness, just to kind of go over that for a second. I really think they're going to use all 3 while all 3 are healthy. I think that Nyheim Hines is going to have a passing game role. That doesn't mean Jonathan Taylor won't have targets, because they love targeting running backs, so he's still going to be involved in the receiving game. But if Taylor's performing poorly and Wilkins is performing well going forward, they're going to do the same thing. Now, the opposite could be true. Taylor could come out some weeks and be really, really good, and they lean on him. But it is annoying, like with San Fran and like with the Rams, that hot hand approaches are very annoying in fantasy, and that's where we're at. So I think we got to drop him down to a low-end running back 2. And then Clyde, of course, Bell being there, I've said that I think his role is going to slowly expand, and they're actually not really using running backs all that much. They're just like, hey, Mahomes, go win us games, which is probably the best approach for them, honestly. And so he's the running back 21 right now, rest of season, because, again, he still has value. And then Kenyon Drake, running back 34 because of his injury, and Chase Edmonds. So that's my take on a few of those situations. Those are the 4 that you guys have asked about the most. If you do prefer this setup, then I can do it again in the wide receiver video. You're just going to have to let me know which wide receivers you want me to talk about. But I do still want to mention a few potential trade targets. So one is James Conner. This isn't going to be some like crazy buy low or anything. He's done really well recently. I think he was running back 14 this week, and he was running back 18 in week 7. So it's not like he's coming off some duds or anything. But sometimes we get too infatuated with needing to buy low on everyone. It's like, oh, I can't trade for someone if they did well. It means that sometimes, because sometimes the owners are like, no, I'm not giving him up for anything. And they'll just be completely ridiculous with the offers. But when players are just performing well and they have a really, really solid role in the team, sometimes just trade for him. Get him on your team. If you've got, like I say, in every video it feels like, a really, really solid bench, go after James Conner, because it's the starting lineup that wins you matchups. He has been dominating the touches in the Steelers' backfield, and he's coming off matchups against the Eagles, the Browns, the Titans, the Ravens. Those aren't all the four best defenses in the league, but none of those are easy matchups for running back. So he's not like dominating and playing Houston and the Packers every week. Like if that was happening, okay, well maybe it's just the matchup. He's playing really good teams, and he's getting a lot of involvement, and no other running back on the team is really being heavily involved. So I feel really good about his role. We look at the upcoming matchup, Cowboys, Bengals, Jaguars. That's awesome. And so I feel very, very good about him. He's my running back 6 rest of season behind Kamara, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Ronald Jones. You got that clump, that 5, and then I think it's James Conner right after that. So like with the Patrick Mahomes trade, I shared with you guys, what was that, like 2 weeks ago, where I said, I gave up a lot, and it seemed like I gave up a lot. But really, it was all bench players. It was all bench players, and then I guess Robert Woods, but he's kind of running my bench anyways. But the point was, I just took a bunch of really solid players ahead of my bench, and I was like, I would like to upgrade my quarterback from Carson Wentz to Patrick Mahomes. And so for me, that was a really smart trade because my starting lineup didn't change at all except upgrading Wentz to Mahomes. You can do that. You can take whatever running back you have right now, upgrade him to James Conner, and just use a few solid bench players that you have. So these deals can get done. I know people like to complain a lot and say, oh, you can't possibly trade for these studs. You can. You just have to be smart about who you're sending. Final one we'll go over today is DeAndre Swift. He's coming off just a disaster of a performance. And so if you don't think you can get James Conner, you can definitely get Swift. He had 6 carries for 1 yard. So the ultimate buy low right now. But I think that is going to cause people to overlook what happened with the snaps. Going into last week, he had 38%, 45% of the snaps in 3 straight weeks, increased to 62% this last week. And while he definitely didn't do well, and Adrian Peterson had 5 carries for 7 yards, and so it's not like either of them was really a factor. And so it's very important to see, okay, coming out of the bye, they've been giving him more work. So one thing, has come off his bye. Same thing with James Conner. James Conner does not have a bye coming up. He's already had it, and so you get to start him every week. Same thing with DeAndre Swift. You could start him. I don't think that on a championship team right now you're starting him, but I do still believe they should be featuring DeAndre Swift. I think there's a chance to close the season they start to lean on him more over Adrian Peterson, and if that happens, this offense is good enough to where if they're featuring Swift, he could be started in the flex, the running back 2 on a championship team. Right now, no. And I really don't think if you have a solid team, you're starting Swift. But he's not going to cost you anything. He could be on free agency in some leagues. And so I think he's a good guy to go after for that upside. The last thing, again, I've got to remind you, if you somehow still have Todd Gurley, the dream schedule is over this week. It just finally finished up with that Panthers matchup. He didn't really play that well, but at least he scored the touchdown. And so if you haven't traded him, now is the time to do it because he starts an absolutely brutal stretch after the dream stretch for running back. So those are my thoughts on some running back situations and some running backs you should be trading for. Again, if you like this kind of structure to the video, I can do this again for wide receivers, but you got to let me know. Put down in the comments section what wide receivers you're having problems with. You're thinking, I don't understand the value on him. I don't know if I should be trading away, trading for. I don't know what to do. I'll go over my thoughts on them in tomorrow's video if you guys have wide receivers you want me to discuss. But that, my friends, is the end of this one. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? But thanks for watching.